Hello and welcome to the Remote Revolution, a podcast by Virtual Mojo. This is where we explore how modern businesses are transforming the way they work through remote teams, virtual support, and smarter operational strategies. In each episode, we bring you insights, conversations, and practical ideas to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and growing companies build efficient, scalable, and future-ready organizations. If you're looking to work smarter, scale faster, and unlock the power of remote talent, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 13 of The Remote Revolution, with your host Aneeq and Umaima as our guest. Today we talk about how your remote team is underperforming, and you don't know it yet. Just because someone's chat icon is glowing green does not mean they are actually doing any real work.
Oh, absolutely. That little green dot is probably the biggest liar in modern business.
Right. I mean, are they driving the business forward, or are they just meticulously wiggling their mouths so their status never flips to away? Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you are listening to this deep dive right now, whether you manage a remote team or you're trying to scale one, or even if you're just navigating your own remote workday, understanding the hidden dynamics of this underperformance is like the ultimate cheat code.
It really is. It's a systemic issue that is catching a tremendous amount of leadership completely off guard. We're operating in this environment where the traditional, legacy metrics of productivity have been just entirely inverted.
Yeah. And that's exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are going to uncover why remote teams can look incredibly busy on the surface while quietly falling apart behind the scenes. And most importantly, and this is where we really want to focus today, we are extracting a concrete list of things to try.
Right, because before we even get to those tactical fixes, we kind of have to look at the psychological mechanics of why leaders fail to see the performance drop in the first place until, it suddenly hits the quarterly revenue report. Our source material points to this phenomenon called the visibility gap.
Okay, I want to dig into the mechanics of that gap. Because in a traditional physical office, a manager is just constantly absorbing ambient information, right?
Yes, exactly. Ambient data.
Like you walk to the break room and you see two engineers sketching on a whiteboard. Or you hear the tone of voice when someone is on a really difficult client call. You see someone staring blankly at their monitor, visibly frustrated. You're seeing the actual messy process of work being done.
It's seeing the struggle.
Right. But in a remote setup, all of that ambient data is it's completely gone.
And what's fascinating here is how the brain compensates for that loss of data. When a manager is stripped of all those micro-observations, they're left with only the final, polished outputs.
Like just the deliverables.
Exactly. They see the sent email, the completed pull request, the updated cell in the spreadsheet. And because they only see the finish line, the source material highlights this terrifying false positive. Basically, silence is suddenly mistaken for productivity.
Wow. Okay, wait, explain that.
Well, in an office, silence usually means people are engaged in deep focus, right? But in a remote environment, silence often means an employee is stuck, or they're overwhelmed, or entirely disengaged, but they just don't want to create a digital paper trail of their struggle.
Okay, but let me push back on that idea of silence for a second, because a lot of remote teams are, frankly, the exact opposite of silent.
Oh, for sure.
If I am looking at my team and they are firing off messages in our Slack channels all day, updating threads, dropping emojis on announcements, responding to my questions within like 3 minutes, isn't that the literal definition of an engaged team?
It feels like it, right?
Yeah. If I post a question and 3 people answer immediately, it feels like I am managing this highly responsive, high-performing unit. I mean, they're clearly working.
See, that responsiveness is exactly the illusion the source material warns us about. There is a massive structural difference between activity and effectiveness.
Activity versus effectiveness. Okay.
Right. When you reward responsiveness, you essentially train your team to prioritize the inbox over deep, focused work. They're spending all their cognitive energy just monitoring the chat channel to prove that they're working.
Oh, wow. So they're just playing defense.
Exactly. They can send messages back and forth for 8 solid hours, creating this massive digital footprint of activity, but make absolutely zero progress toward a complex business goal.
It's like a hamster wheel, There is a ton of movement, a ton of sweat, but zero actual forward momentum. The business feels like it's moving 100 miles an hour, but it's just a car revving its engine in neutral.
That is a perfect analogy. You're measuring visible hours or online status instead of actual outcomes.
Okay, so if we can't trust the glowing green dot and a flurry of chat notifications is actually a false signal, what are the real warning signs? Like, how does a leader actually know their team is quietly failing?
Well, remote underperformance does not announce itself with some catastrophic fiery explosion. It manifests as a slow leak.
A slow leak.
Yeah. You start to notice that a standard task that used to take 2 days is suddenly taking 3 or 4.
Yeah.
The communication starts to lose its nuance. Responses become much shorter, more transactional.
Like they're just doing the bare minimum to get you off their back.
Exactly. And the most critical warning sign is a complete drop in initiative. Team members will perfectly execute the explicit baseline of what they are told to do, but they stop anticipating problems. They start proposing new ideas.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the sources dive into the root causes behind this slow leak, and they point heavily toward burnout.
Yes, burnout is huge here.
But think about the contradiction there. The common stereotype of remote work is that it's this incredibly relaxed, flexible environment. People assume that because you aren't commuting and you're working in sweatpants with access to your own kitchen, the stress is lower. So how are they burning out in sweatpants?
It's a great question, because it's not about physical exertion. It's about blurred boundaries and the cognitive friction of the medium itself.
Right, because you're living in your office.
Yes, people are working while mentally exhausted. Working in a poorly structured remote team is, it's like trying to play a high-stakes game of chess by mail where half your letters get delayed. The mental load of constantly trying to track where every project is, who has the ball, and waiting for asynchronous answers, it's exhausting.
It's like driving a car with the parking brake on. You are pressing the gas, you're trying to go, but the engine is just wearing itself out without actually going any faster.
Yeah, exactly. And the cognitive load is immense. It fundamentally alters how an employee processes their work. The source material describes this as the dangerous shift from proactive to reactive mode.
Proactive to reactive.
Right. When you are operating in an environment with high cognitive friction, your brain literally starts rationing energy. You stop looking at the horizon to see what obstacles are coming next month. Instead, you just hunker down and react to whatever notification pops up next. The creative energy is just completely gone.
So what does this all mean for the manager who suddenly realizes their team is stuck in this reactive, exhausted state? Because panic usually sets in right here, right?
Oh, absolutely. The immediate instinct is to seize control.
Right. So let's say I am that manager. I see the slow leak. I notice my team is just checking boxes. My immediate instinct is to say, okay, we are too disconnected. We need a mandatory 15-minute vocal sync every morning at 9 a.m. Right. I think I need to hear their voices. I need to capture the nuance that Chad is missing, and I need to keep them accountable. Isn't scheduling an extra daily check-in the most logical first step?
No, it's actually the worst thing you can do. If we connect this to the bigger picture of why the team is exhausted in the first place, injecting a synchronous meeting is treating a structural wound with a temporary patch.
Really? Just a patch?
It assumes the problem is a lack of face time when the actual problem is a lack of system clarity. The source material points out that adding more meetings just creates another layer of fake activity.
Back to the fake activity.
Exactly. It interrupts their morning workflow, it forces context switching, and it doesn't actually resolve the underlying ambiguity of their tasks.
So it's a total leadership trap. The manager feels better because they, quote-unquote, did something and saw everyone's face, but the team's actual workflow is now even more fragmented.
Exactly. And the sources mention another massive trap: throwing new software at the problem. Businesses think, oh, if we just buy this new messaging app or this project tracker, our communication will be fixed.
But tools don't solve communication problems, do they?
No. Habits do. Buying a sophisticated tracking software for a team that doesn't know how to communicate is, it's like buying a grand piano for someone who doesn't know how to play. It just takes up space and makes everyone feel guilty.
That is such a good way to put it.
The underlying issue the manager is usually ignoring is that the team lacks structure. They don't know when to update, how to report issues, or how quickly to respond. And when a leader overreacts emotionally to underperformance by throwing meetings and tracking software at an already burnt-out team, it instantly breeds a culture of fear.
And fear is the absolute death of proactive work. Like, if I am terrified my manager thinks I'm slacking, I'm going to make absolutely sure my chat icon stays active, and I'm going to ask permission for every tiny decision so I don't get blamed. It drives the team even deeper into reactive paralysis.
Which is exactly why the source material provides such a robust, intentional framework to reverse this. Because we can't just sit here and tell leaders what not to do.
Yes, and this is the core focus of our deep dive today. We've diagnosed the illness, we've highlighted the mistakes. Now let's focus entirely on the cure. The sources lay out a highly practical, fix-it blueprint, the real things to try to get a remote team humming again.
Yes, let's get into the blueprint. It requires highly intentional leadership.
So, step 1 on this list, review clarity first. What does that actually look like?
Well, reviewing clarity requires far more than just checking if a job description exists somewhere in an HR folder. It means auditing the actual definition of done.
The definition of done, I like that.
Right. In a remote environment, ambiguity is an operational hazard. As a leader, you have to ask, does every single person on this team actually know exactly what their top priorities are this week? Are those responsibilities documented in a place where everyone can see them?
That documentation piece is crucial because in an office, you can rely on the tap on the shoulder, right? Like, hey, did you want those key 3 numbers in a spreadsheet or a slide deck?
Exactly. You just lean over the desk and ask.
But in a remote setting, if the expected format, the deadline, and the specific parameters aren't explicitly written down, the employee will either just guess and do it wrong, or they will halt all progress while they wait 3 hours for you to respond to a chat message.
And the mechanism behind that fix is about removing the burden of assumption. When clarity is high, accountability is actually possible because you can't fairly evaluate an employee's performance if they were operating off a completely different set of assumptions than you were.
Right. The first fix is ensuring everyone is executing from the exact same playbook. Okay, so assuming we have established that baseline clarity, the blueprint moves to the second major thing to try, audit communication patterns.
Yeah.
Now, let me challenge the feasibility of this for a second. How does a manager actually perform a communication audit without crossing the line into Big Brother territory? Like, I can't read everyone's direct messages to see if they were talking to each other. How do you do this ethically?
That's a great point. You don't read their DMs. You audit the systemic artifacts of the work, not the individuals themselves. A communication audit is about looking for bottlenecks and information silos.
Okay, give me an example.
For example, you look at a recent project that missed its deadline, you map backwards. When was the first time someone flagged that the timeline was in jeopardy? If a major roadblock existed for 2 weeks, but it was only communicated to the broader team 2 days before the launch, your communication system is broken.
So you are measuring the speed at which bad news travels. That is a brilliant metric.
Exactly. Our problem's being discussed openly. If bad news is moving slowly, it means the team doesn't feel psychologically safe reporting failure, or they simply don't know the proper channel to escalate an issue without feeling like they're, causing a panic.
Wow. Okay, so clarity, then auditing communication. What's the third thing to try?
The third piece is provide context. You have to connect individual tasks to the bigger business goals. Employees need to know why their work matters.
That makes so much sense, because the sources make a profound point here about the isolation of remote work. When you are sitting alone in your home office, just processing tickets or answering emails, it is incredibly easy to lose the plot.
Because the ambient why has been stripped away. In an office, you might overhear the sales team cheering about a massive new contract, or you might see the physical product being boxed up for shipping. You physically feel the momentum of the company.
Right, but remote work isolates the employee into a vacuum where they only see their specific, microscopic piece of the puzzle. It's the classic difference between a worker who thinks they are just laying bricks versus a worker who knows they're building a cathedral.
Yes, perfect example.
Like, if I am just told, compile this data by Friday, that is a chore. But if I am told, compile this data by Friday because it feeds directly into the board deck on Monday, and if these numbers are accurate, we secure the funding for our new product line, suddenly, my work has immense gravity.
And providing context is the ultimate intrinsic motivator. When a manager isn't physically present to cheer an employee on, the employee has to draw motivation from the purpose of the work itself. High-performing remote leaders over-communicate context constantly.
Okay, so that brings us to the final and perhaps most difficult thing to try in the blueprint. Build trust. And the source specifically defines this as checking progress consistently based on measurable outcomes, entirely divorcing performance from the concept of minutes tracked or micromanaging.
This is the paradigm shift that most traditional managers really struggle with. We have a century of industrial-era management theory built on the premise that presence equals performance.
If you were physically standing at the assembly line, you were working.
Exactly, or sitting at the cubicle desk. But in the knowledge economy, and specifically in the remote knowledge economy, presence is a completely irrelevant metric.
Entirely irrelevant. And yet, managers still try to enforce it. They track keystrokes, or they mandate that the webcam stays on, or they monitor chat activity.
Right, which goes back to the hamster wheel. Strong remote leaders create trust by defining the parameters of success, the clarity and context we just discussed, and then they hand over the ownership of the execution to the employee.
You measure the quality and the timeliness of the deliverable.
Yes. If the deliverable is excellent and on time, it fundamentally does not matter if the employee did the work at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday or 11 p.m. on a Sunday.
You manage by agreement, not by attendance.
Exactly.
Looking at this entire blueprint, reviewing clarity, auditing how fast bad news travels, over-communicating the context, and shipping strictly to outcome-based trust, I am struck by a massive irony here.
What's that?
We all championed remote work because we wanted ultimate flexibility, right? We wanted freedom from the rigid corporate structure. But the reality exposed in these sources is that to make remote work actually function without burning everyone out, successful remote teams actually need far more rigid structure and clear rules than in-office teams ever did.
This raises an important question about how we define accountability. Good leaders create accountability by defining what success looks like clearly, giving employees ownership, and focusing on performance systems rather than just, vague flexibility. The office allowed us to be lazy communicators. Remote work absolutely punishes lazy communication.
Wow. It ruthlessly exposes weak management.
It does. In a physical office, charisma and proximity can kind of mask a lack of organizational structure. A charismatic manager can keep a team energized just by walking the floor and chatting, even if the actual project goals are a total mess. But in a remote environment, charisma cannot compensate for a lack of clarity.
So let's distill all of this for you, the listener. If you take away just one core insight from this deep dive into our sources today, it is the vital distinction between movement and progress. Never confuse activity with effectiveness. A bustling chat channel and rapid response times do not mean your business is succeeding. It might just mean your team is terrified to look away from their screens. Remote underperformance is a quiet disease of misaligned expectations.
And the cure isn't more micromanaging or tracking software. It's clarity, intentional communication, and outcome-based leadership.
Exactly. So I want to challenge you directly right now. Look at your own remote work habits and look at the infrastructure of your team. Are you actively moving the needle on your projects, or have you slowly slipped into the comfortable trap of just being highly responsive on chat? Are you driving the mission forward, or are you just managing the illusion of being busy?
It's a profound self-audit, and I think it leaves us with something really provocative to consider as we look at the future of work. Well, if successful remote work requires us to be this meticulously intentional about documenting clarity, designing structure, and tracking true outcomes, rather than just relying on physical visibility, does that mean the remote work revolution is actually forcing us to become vastly better managers and communicators than the traditional office ever required us to be?
Without the crutch of proximity, we actually have to learn how to lead. That is a phenomenal thought to sit with. Remember, a spinning wheel might look impressive, but it doesn't mean the vehicle is moving. Take the parking brake off, define the destination, and measure the journey by the milestones you actually cross. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Thank you for listening to The Remote Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with other professionals who are building the future of work. To learn more about how Virtual Mojo helps businesses grow with highly trained virtual assistants and remote support teams, visit www.virtualmojo.com. For inquiries or collaborations, reach out to us at contact@virtualmojo.com. Until next time, keep building smarter systems and embracing the future of work.